Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Time to see what is making the headlines with the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire. Welcome and great to see both of you. So as ever, let's take a look, shall we, at the front pages. Starting with the Metro, the only way is ethics. That's how the Metro describes the announcement that Boris Johnson's ethics advisor, Lord Geidt, has quit over his concerns about Partygate. The Eye also makes that resignation its front page lead. The Telegraph too, which says Lord Geidt is concerned that the PM breached the ministerial code over the parties at Downing Street. The Guardian says the latest resignation piles more pressure on a beleaguered Boris Johnson. The Times taking a similar line about the growing pressure on the PM. And the halting of the government's first flight of migrants to Rwanda is the lead for the Express, with an attack by the Home Secretary on the European Court of Human Rights. While the Daily Mail says the government may just ignore such interventions in the future. Financial Times, meanwhile, leading with that news of a rise in US interest rates as the Federal Reserve tries to tackle worsening inflation. And please save Beatrix. The Mirror has an exclusive about a couple who donated their stillborn child's heart to save another youngster and now need a donor organ for their own 16-month-old daughter. And to the Star, it says, hallelujah, we're about to get a pill that will replace the need to go to the gym and that a pint of lager a day is good for your health. Right. A quick reminder, by scanning the QR codes you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch our guests. So let's return then to Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire. And perhaps not surprisingly, Andrew, Lord Geidt making many a front page. To be fair, it was a very brief statement from him. Is it supposition why he left?
Well, it's all very odd, isn't it? The timing. It came out just before 6 o'clock, so great for the newspapers because it's late breaking news. One sentence is his resignation. You would have thought if he was going to resign, Anna, it would have been when he published his annual report, was critical of Partygate, sensed a sense of frustration. Boris Johnson then responding, saying he had no intention of resigning. Everyone thought that was the moment when he was going to go. We were told he could be going within hours, but he stayed. Some suggestion that the Prime Minister had persuaded him to stay. Then he gives evidence yesterday, and in a classic old Whitehall piece of evidence, he didn't really say very much, but it's what he didn't say spoke volumes. So you got the clear inference that he thought the Prime Minister had breached the ministerial code, but he didn't say so. And he still didn't resign. And then 24 hours later, when nobody was expecting it, he goes. I suspect he dwelt on what was said at that select committee yesterday. He read the papers today. He thought about it and he just thought, it's just too uncomfortable. So he's gone. Whether he's going to give us any more details, I suspect he won't, because he's not a man who likes running to the press, talking to the press, as much as we'd like to talk to him.
Yes, trained in that with his work in Buckingham Palace, no doubt. But yes, suggesting to MPs it was reasonable to suggest the Prime Minister had broken the ministerial code by breaching those lockdown laws. And then what would he do about that? That was kind of the point, Kevin, wasn't it?
Yeah, given that Boris Johnson is judge and jury on himself, which does seem, it's always been the position, but it just seems to be wrong, where you would think perhaps Parliament should decide, although then MPs will be whipped. Whoever's in power will whip their MPs, and then you can just say no breach. But the Telegraph point out he considered going last December over the Prime Minister's wallpaper when he'd cleared Boris Johnson over who paid for his wallpaper, and then messages came out that showed he did know who was paying for his wallpaper, the Prime Minister claiming he hadn't. And Telegraph again point out the last ethics advisor, Alex Allen, went in November 2020 after the report into bullying by Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, which the Prime Minister effectively ignored. She made a statement apologising, and that was it. But the Telegraph also quote, I see, William Bragg, who's chair of the Public Administration Committee, a Conservative MP, critic of Boris Johnson, who's praising Geidt's integrity. So the focus is back on the Prime Minister's own position, his integrity or lack of, his honour or lack of, his personal conduct, which isn't good. And he would have thought after Partygate last week, he'd shifted on, he'd moved away from it, but seems not.
Yeah, and is there a pattern of behaviour emerging from Boris Johnson? You know, the fixed penalty notice he got with the cake, the ambushing of the cake moment, we all remember it. You know, that was the unwitting bit that Boris Johnson said. And the Downing Street flat refurbishment, you know, he'd explained to Lord Geidt, you know, that he hadn't known, he hadn't realised where the money was coming from. And then obviously these messages, as Kevin was explaining, were revealed. You know, it keeps being unwitting, doesn't it? Is that the defence from this Prime Minister, Andrew?
Well, look, Boris Johnson has had an interesting relationship with the truth. There's no doubt about that. Now, whether it's because he's just not great on detail, which I suspect he isn't, and people know that, but Lord Geidt could have resigned over the wallpaper because the Prime Minister said he wasn't sure who was paying for it. Then WhatsApp messages came to light, which suggested he did know. It was a Tory donor called Lord Brownlow. I suspect if that had been public money involved, i.e. the taxpayer had been involved in decorating the Downing Street flat, Lord Geidt would have gone. But as it was a Tory donor, had already got a peerage, no suggestion he got anything out of it. But it was an odd episode, actually. But I still think it's very odd that Geidt, I mean, he's had a stellar career in the civil service. He was the Queen's private secretary, hugely respected in Buckingham Palace. Why he's gone now is just so very odd, because the time to go, and it would have had much more dramatic effect, in my view, was at the time when Boris Johnson was under huge pressure over Partygate. And although this has projected it back to the front pages tomorrow, I suspect it will only stay there for a couple of days unless there's something new about to come out about those parties. But I can't see what that can be, because we've had Sue Gray's report, and that was pretty exhaustive. So it feels to me like, in a sense, the maximum point of danger for the Prime Minister has already passed.
Yeah, but Lord Geidt may not be trying to make impact. You know, this is not about political damage. In fact, The Guardian picks up on what you said, Kevin. To read The Guardian, it is understood that the robust evidence session confirmed in Geidt's mind that his position was no longer tenable. One person who had spoken to him said he was sick of being lied to. Another said Geidt was frustrated at his portrayal as a patsy. And after what one friend called a long night of the soul, Geidt sent this strongly worded letter to Boris Johnson. Now, will we get sight of that, do you think? And already Labour saying that Boris Johnson has driven both of his own hand-picked ethics advisers to resign in despair, as they put it.
He has. That's presumably because Boris Johnson is very, very unethical. Andrew was talking about a strange relationship to the truth. Boris Johnson's a complete stranger to the truth. He's just very, very rarely truthful. I think when he is truthful, it's probably accidental. And you read that in The Guardian. Like, Geidt isn't an assassin. He hasn't quit to take out the Prime Minister. There isn't a political agenda there. I think after that incredibly uncomfortable hearing yesterday, it's true. He appeared a patsy. I'd call him a patsy myself in the past. I used to joke if I was ever accused of anything serious, I wanted to be investigated by Geidt, because he wouldn't get the root of it. You'd almost certainly be cleared. He'd believe anything you say, and off you go. And I suspect that has all just mounted up, and he realised that whatever he was being paid, whatever perks he got, whatever status he enjoyed from that position, it was damaging him. It was undermining him. And as Andrew said, he's got a long, distinguished career in the civil service. He was the Queen's secretary, and that was all just being sort of washed away. And the stain was going to be there that he was the ethics advisor for an incredibly unethical Prime Minister. So he's had enough. But as for that letter, I would like to see that. I would like to see that letter. I'd like to see that letter in full. I think we should see that letter. Whether we do or not is another matter, of course.
Well, Downing Street. Apologies, Kevin. The Metro, as we all have read ourselves, Downing Street did not comment officially. A source insisted, "We are surprised. This is a mystery to the PM." Only on Monday he said he would like to stay on for another 6 months. But this idea of Boris Johnson having an interesting relationship with the truth, as you put it, do you think after Partygate the public want to see, that being cleaned up, that actually we want a bit more straightforwardness now from those in Downing Street, Andrew?
Of course. And Partygate was a very damaging episode for the Prime Minister, people in Number 10. It was a very unedifying episode. Lots of people we don't need to rehearse all the reasons why, but the great British public mostly obeyed the rules. And then we discovered there was a flagrant breaching of the rules in Number 10. Prime Minister fined just the one time. Some people thought he should have been fined more often, but that was up to the police. Yeah, of course, he's got to be, and he'll have been told this by Tory MPs. Remember, he lost the support of 41% of them in that confidence vote just a couple of weeks ago, which already seems, Anna, like a lifetime ago, because politics is moving so quickly and so rapidly and changing so fast at the moment. But I suspect when he was before that 1922 committee of MPs, they said you've got to prevent any more of these sort of episodes which sap his moral authority. Now, this is an uncomfortable moment for the Prime Minister again, but it goes back to something that's already been well rehearsed and well ventilated and which we already know a lot about. Yes, in a sense, nothing new there.
Yes, and in fact, I think it was only last week, wasn't it? As you say, it's going fast. And this was supposed to be Partygate-free week for the PM, wasn't it? But we move on to other matters after this quick break, including Raab's threat to ignore Euro court rulings. That's on the front page of the Daily Mail, as the government rails against the blocking of the first deportation flight to Rwanda. Watching the press preview with me now, the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and Kevin Maguire, associate editor of the Daily Mirror. Welcome back to both of you. So, Kevin, let's go to the Daily Mail, shall we? What to do about Rwanda after the intervention of the European Court, which we heard so much about today, and the threat from Dominic Raab to do what about that Euro Court ruling?
Yeah, he according to the Mail, it's been briefed that he may, ignore late rulings by the European Court of Human Rights, which remind those who are Brexit obsessed, it has nothing to do with the European Union. That may, I think, is very, very heavy and hanging because look, the Prime Minister hinted Britain could pull out. I suspect Britain won't, but how many fights do you want with the rest of the world? Do you want to stop it and try and get off it? Do you want to debase standards, just not respect standards that are seen in other civilized countries, or will you follow them? And look, the whole Rwanda program, whatever you think about it, whether you think it is right or wrong, was an utter shambles, not least because the government tried to rush it through for PR reasons and hadn't allowed people to exhaust the legal system on whether or not they could be sent. So Dominic Raab wants to pick a fight with somebody else, as Priti Patel does, as Boris Johnson does. But in the end, it's another failure by probably the most incompetent UK government in living memory.
Yes, and obviously, separately, we had the European Commission taking legal action over the Northern Ireland Protocol. But as you're right, this has got nothing to do with the European Union. But this idea of actually pulling out of the European Convention of Human Rights, which underpins that court. I mean, Belarus isn't a member. And earlier this year, Russia got thrown out of the Council of Europe. So do we want to be associated with countries like that, Andrew, on this?
Well, the first Prime Minister to float the idea of withdrawing from it was actually Theresa May, and nobody sees her as a foaming foaming at the mouth Brexiteer. She was an arch Remainer because she just didn't really have much respect for that court. Look, the High Court and the Court of Appeal both cleared that flight to go ahead to Rwanda. So frankly, what business is it of the European Court to stick its big, great nose in it? And it's a gift for the Tory party and Brexiteers, because they'll say, here you go again. Kevin's quite right. It's not the European Union, but it's the European Court but sticking its nose in. We don't even know the name of the judge who presided. They don't even tell you that. And you know, some of the people who preside over these European court rulings aren't even judges. They're high-powered lawyers. It's not the same. And I think there were 5 judges involved in the British legal process, one unnamed legal figure in the European court verdict. So I would prefer the British legal verdict, frankly, to the European court one. And I think I would be wary about withdrawing from that whole convention and the European court. But a few more incidents like that, and you can see why the government will go down that route. And I think, actually, it'll be very popular.
Yes, and the European court...
Andrew, I don't know why you just stop... Why do you stop at the European Convention on Human Rights? Why do you withdraw from the UN and the Geneva Convention?
Yeah, well, why not?
The World Trade Organization, NATO, the ILO, the World Health Organization. Why don't you just pull out of them all? Look, the whole idea of joining is you have common standards, and they're common standards of decency. The European Convention of Human Rights has helped improve the mental health of people in Britain.
Well,
job rights, work rights, abolishing...
Kevin, you've never had any faith in the British system.
It's actually been incredibly progressive, and we signed up to it. And don't forget, Winston Churchill pushed it after the Second World War to have standards across Europe that were decent.
Yeah, OK, Kevin, I hear that. I hear you foaming at the mouth rant. British judiciary is the envy of the world, and I'm quite content that British judicial standards are just as good as the European Court and the European Convention. We can have our own Bill of Rights. What's wrong with that? Why do you never ever want anything to be British, Kevin? It's always got to be European. Always.
The European Court ruling was to allow the judicial review of this policy to take place next month. But we'll leave it there for now. Gentlemen, we've run out of time, sadly. Kevin Maguire, Andrew Pearce, thank you both very much indeed